As you may know from other videos I've made, armor and escape from Tarkov is extremely important, and choosing the right one can mean the difference between life and death. But with some of the recent changes with these different hidden stats on armor, a lot of people may be confused. So today we're going to be looking at blunt damage modifiers and whether they actually make armor completely useless. Stick around and find out. So first of all, let's look at a hidden stat that's been in the game since the inception of armor itself, and that is called blunt throughput. You may have recently seen there was a tweet from Battlestate Games announcing they changed this stat by up to 40% on helmets, armors, and rigs. But what does this really mean? Well, as you know, armors in Tarkov are set as specific armor level from 1 through till 6. Ammunition of specific types then has a penetration value. This value can be found in the ammo chart, and I'll link one below if you don't have one already. When a round hits an armor, the penetration value rolls against the armor it hits. A calculation takes place, and the armor class plus the remaining durability of the armor determines how likely the round is to penetrate. Now, for the sake of an easy example, let's say the round is around about 50 penetration points, and the armor class is level 5. Then there is a 99% chance it penetrates the armor, and in the process damages the armor itself and wherever on the body it hit. But the interesting thing is, when a round penetrates, it loses 0 to 40% of its damage, and this is absorbed by the armor itself. In most cases, around 20% of the damage is actually lost. On top of this, the armor and flesh damage that is lost correlates to how likely the round is to penetrate. So imagine for a second there's a round that shouldn't have a snowball's chance in hell to penetrate, but somehow actually manages to do so. All of the force that it took to get through that armor sort of gets lost by the round. In other words, it's more likely that a higher percentage of the damage, like the 40%, will be lost. Now likewise, a round like 7.62 by 51 M61 with 64 penetration, which is an absolutely insane round, was to hit something like a level 1 armor, it would lose almost 0% of its flesh damage. And this is because it had a crazy high chance to go through. So now we understand a little bit more about penetration. But what happens to an armor if the round doesn't penetrate? If a bullet doesn't penetrate, blunt damage is applied. Now this percentage that it does is actually based off the specific armor's blunt throughput stat. And now this is where that stat that Battlestate Games was talking about comes in. Each individual armor has a unique modifier that tells the game how much it lets through, even if it doesn't roll a penetration. This is to simulate the way a round impacts an armor and the force that gets spread through the plates. This is a good thing, because although I've never been hit while wearing a plate carrier in real life, I can imagine getting hit with almost any round would absolutely suck. So, as for what got nerfed, we can actually see most armors saw some pretty big increases in percentages they let through. To see it in action, we decided to test some of the major changes versus a round, which was perfect for the job. For this testing, we chose 12 by 70 RIP slugs. RIP has 265 flesh damage, which isn't as nearly as high as Magnum Buckshot or Shrap 10. However, it has extremely low penetration at a measly 2, and it's a single projectile, aka a slug, which makes it perfect to test. For the testing, we actually started with some common level 4 armors, starting off with one of my favorites, the AMA M1 rig. This armored steel rig has a throughput value of around about 0.225, which used to be 0.15 before the update. A decent change, but you'll immediately notice the first shot lets through around about 12 of the 265 damage. Now each subsequent hit only does 1 point of damage to the armor. We also tested a TV110, another popular steel plate rig. It has slightly worse throughput of 0.24, and each hit did 13 damage, and only 1 point of armor damage. We then tested two of the worst case scenario armors. Now these are the 6B3TM rig and the Thor CV. Out of all of the changes, these two armors got hit the hardest. The 6B3TM, a popular armored rig at around about level 4, went from 0.24 to a whopping 0.36 throughput. The Thor also shares the same throughput value at 0.36 as well. And when we tested them, the difference was immediately noticeable. The first round against the 6B3TM did 20 damage to the thorax, which is very significant. The Thor also let through 20 damage as well. As for the level 5 armors, most, if not all of them, were heavily affected. There was around about a 10 to 15% nerf across the board on the level 5s. However, one of the most popular armors in the game, the Korund, actually got hit the hardest. Korund has actually now a throughput of 0.288, making it one of the worst out of the level 5 armors. When we tested the Korund, it actually happened to let around 16 damage through, which is really interesting because the Defender 2, which is also a level 5 steel armor, sharing the same material type, also only let through 13. Gazelle, a ceramic level 5, performed the best out of all of the level 5 armors we tested, with the smallest throughput of 0.144. This budget armor even outperformed a 6B13M, or the killer armor, by actually letting through only 8 damage compared to the killer armor's 13. For level 6, this is where things got really interesting. Now, first of all, we saw that the Zabralo heavy armor, one of the supposed strongest armors in the game, let through a whopping 16 damage. The Tagilla AVS and the Thor Integrated, which is one of the new level 6 armors, let through 15 damage each. The Zook 6A let through 14. The Hex Grid, an ultra high weight polyethylene level 6, and the Slick, a steel plate, both let through the lowest amount, each at 13 damage. They also applied these changes to helmets in general. And what I found really interesting is we tested a bunch of different helmets to see the likelihood of actually dying to random flesh-specific rounds. Although the ringing was terrible, I endured through it for your sake. So you better love me or at least subscribe to the YouTube, because all I listened to for about 20 minutes was constant ringing. But what we found was almost all of the helmets were able to take a lot of punishment. A standout difference that I noticed was the difference between the Alton and the Resti, where the Resti was able to actually take one extra hit before the person would die. Although getting shot 5 times in the head with rip slugs would suck either way. What we noticed was the Alton took 5 to kill and the Resti would take 6. All of the helmets in general took some solid punishment before they got close to killing, however. But we noticed one major difference, and that was getting shot in all of the visors was a far better alternative. I'm not sure whether the devs decided to not nerf the visors and they're still running off the original stats, or whether they've kept it this way on purpose. However, all of the visors have significantly lower throughput values than all of the helmets combined. Though even after this testing, I was still super curious if it was possible to kill someone in one shot using only blunt damage. So we went back into a raid, but this time I took a KS-23 with Shrap 10. Now this round has 8 pellets that do 87 damage each, or 696 damage in total. This round can one-shot any part of the body not protected by armor. In fact, we've tested the Shrap 10 in a KS-23 video, and this round is absolutely bonkers. But this time, we decided to test it up against some of the worst performing armors, due to the fact that Shrap 10 doesn't have a lot of penetration. Now first up was the 6B3TM. The shot did immediately 8 damage to the armor, and this was 1 damage to the armor per pellet. But the craziest part was that it did 50 points of blunt damage towards me while wearing a 6B3TM, and the Thor CV sharing the same throughput did the exact same. We also tested this with the Tagilla vest, one of the level 6 armors that got added recently, and this actually let through 38 damage, which is still quite significant. However, I did want to point out that while testing this, a couple pellets hit me in the stomach on the raid before and immediately killed me. So the Tagilla vest with no stomach protection doesn't mean you're going to take this many rounds. If they were to aim any lower, you would immediately die anyway. But I was still curious about the one-shot potential on the head, as the head actually has less HP points than the thorax. So we decided to try and test the one-shot through a strong helmet like the Alton, where Shrap 10 ended up doing 23 points of blunt damage to the back of the head, which is nuts because before this update, it probably would have done closer to 12 to 10 damage. Regardless, we weren't able to one-shot any of the armors or any of the helmets in the game, so your meta Andes should be fine after a bit more of a migraine and a little bit more damage to the head. So what are the takeaways from these nerfs? Well, the interesting thing that I found out from this testing was that material type is not the defining factor. Some steel armors will perform better than others. A standout here, however, was the Gazelle, which is a ceramic plate that does a great job at spreading the blunt damage. Part of the reason ceramic is so good is that in a real-life situation, it is one of the best at dispersing energy when the plate cracks or breaks. Weirdly enough, Zook 6A, another ceramic armor, was somehow worse than other armors like Hexgrid, which is made of ultra-high-weight polyethylene, which I imagine in a real-life situation would probably be worse to be hit with. Rigs like the 6B3TM made of Titan and Thor CV made of combined materials were already very weak, but they've been nerfed even harder, which I don't think was 100% necessary, but maybe the devs are trying to do something I'm not understanding. Overall, however, armor is still 100% worth wearing. As you can see that all of this damage I stopped, if I wasn't wearing any armor, this slug would one-shot me anyway. The main change from all of this is that weapons with pretty decent fire rate but medium tier pen will actually hit a lot harder against some of the better armors in the game. Even if you don't penetrate, enough shots will still bring someone down, as the blunt damage is definitely going to help. How this applies is you can imagine you are hitting someone with 8.5mm buckshot, and some hit the arms and some hit the legs. Now, some of the pellets that hit the armor are actually going to hurt a little bit more, but it's not going to one-shot with a couple pellets hitting the armor. It's just simply going to apply a little bit more damage through the armor itself. If I could make any changes towards this current update, I believe that they should make the ceramic armors noticeably better in terms of throughput. As the repairability and also the other problems with ceramic, this would make it, just a reason to choose it above the others. However, maybe the armor rework will make all of this make a little bit more sense, and only time will tell. Hey guys, that's it for this video. If you'd like to see the throughput stats of each armor, I'm going to attach a spreadsheet below that an absolute legend called Logical Solutions was kind enough to share with me. So you guys can have a look for yourself if you're curious about any of the values that I tested here today, or if you just want to have a look for yourself and try and understand a little bit more. If you guys enjoyed these types of breakdowns, let me know in the comments down below if there's another hidden stat or something to do with armor that you'd like to see me do next. I appreciate you guys watching to the very end, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.